Hello, I'm Kieran Lynch and welcome to Obicast, the Chocolate Sheep podcast. Each episode will bring latest insights, advice and technical updates for the sheep industry. As part of Sustainability Week, I'm joined by Teagasc advisor Tom Call to discuss the 12 steps from the Teagasc Signpost team to reduce gaseous emissions on sheep farms. We'll discuss the 12 steps with Tom breaking them down into 3 key sections, namely land, livestock and inputs. Tom takes us through each of these individually, explaining how the changes required might be implemented on farms, what's involved, and what the benefits are for the environment and for the farmer. We finish up with Tom encouraging farmers to consider what steps are already implementing and what additional areas they could focus on for the coming seasons. We start the episode with Tom highlighting how some of these steps will require a change in mindset, others are common practice in sheep farms, and how they will not only have environmental benefits, but they will also result in better welfare and profitability on sheep farms.
The Teagasc Signpost team, they've developed or produced a document outlining the 12 steps to reducing the gaseous emissions on sheep farms. Some of these steps will require a change in mindset. Many others are common practice in sheep farms, and the adoption of all the steps will not only increase the farm income, but will also improve the farm from an environmental and animal welfare perspective. We can nearly break down the steps. There are 12 steps in the document, but if we look at them and maybe break them down into 3 major areas, and that's the use of the assets that you have on your farm and the inputs that you're putting in. So we're looking at a more efficient use of probably our main asset, and that's the land that all farmers have and where they're feeding their livestock on. And next then we're looking at the actual livestock on the farm. In this case, it's the ewe, and getting as much out of that ewe as you possibly can, thereby increasing the output on the ewe. And then, we're looking at then, more efficient use of the inputs that we're putting in on the farm, and maybe a change in some of the inputs that we're actually putting in.
It's a useful way, Tom, when looking at that. And I suppose at the end of this, we have to consider we have sectoral targets we have to meet as an industry. But a lot of what we're looking at here, it has a positive economic impact on the farm. It's really adoption of some of the best practice principles. And as you indicated there, some of these are already in place on a lot of farms that you're working with. I think it's a useful way you broke that down into the 3 steps. Maybe if we look at it from that point of view, so with the 12 steps in it, and you can have them broken into 3 sections. So if we look at how we use the land maybe first, what are the couple of things we can do differently there from that 12 steps plan?
Right. So we look at our asset, the land there. So what you're trying to get is better use of what's there in the land, and maybe if we move through the steps, one of them is actually applying lime to the land. So what you're doing by applying lime is you're increasing the availability of the nitrogen, the phosphorus, and the potassium that you actually apply for plant growth. And what you're also doing there is you're freeing up background nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium that's in your farm that could be locked up and as a reservoir there. So that's actually saving you money, and it's making better use of that land. And Teagasc have shown that for every euro that you spend on lime, you probably get anything from €4 to a €7 return, so it's not only is it good for the environment, it's good for your pocket as well. And we also see that you can release by applying lime as well on most land types, you can release up to 70 kilos of nitrogen from the soil, and that's equivalent to about 56 units per acre of free nitrogen in a way. The other one that we probably all should be focusing on is another step there is building soil fertility, and this should obviously be based on soil analysis. And a lot of farmers have taken soil samples in the last number of years, and now it's time to act on those. For lower stock farms, you don't really need to be looking at index 3 and index 4. So you look at what you need for your stocking rate and for the animals that's on the farm. And when we're looking at then to build the soil P and K levels, what we recommend is that you use using straight compounds in conjunction with protected urea that we'll talk about a bit later on. And that's your O1020s, your O130s, or if you have to use a compound, if that suits your farm better, that you would use a compound such as 18-6-12 or 10-10-20, because research in Johnstown Castle would show that both 18-6-12 and 10-10-20 are, most of the nitrogen in those is coming from ammonia rather than the nitrate, and that's more more efficient as far as the environment. There's less losses of ammonia and less emissions through nitrous oxide from those type of products.
So, like from that point of view, that's a win-win. When you're increasing productivity of your ground, you're going to grow more grass, produce more. From an environmental point of view, you're getting better efficiency of nitrogen usage, and you're cutting your input costs as well, particularly with lime. Like it's a no-brainer, really. So it is, we've been talking about for years, but it's a huge benefit. So, Tom, on the second one, like maybe it probably ties in with what you've covered already, but from the input point of view, look, we know inputs have gone up massively, particularly fertilizer in the last year, and it's likely to maybe stay that way. What's included in them 12 steps that kind of looks at our inputs and how we can address them on farms?
Yeah, so probably one of the main inputs across all sheep farms is apart from concentrate, it's fertilizer use. So what we're trying to do here is get farmers to use protected urea instead of can-based products. When we use protected urea, we get a 78% lower ammonia emissions than we would get from using ordinary urea, and we get 70% lower nitrous oxide emissions than we would if we were using can-based products. So the other thing about protected urea is it's actually cheaper than can per kilo of nitrogen, and we get when you compare it to ordinary urea, you're probably getting something in the order of 12 to 13% extra grass growth by using protected urea because of the obvious less losses. And urea, as it's again, it's an ammonia-based fertilizer. It's positively charged, your soil's negatively charged, so it's held better in the soil, less chances of losses, and less emissions and spreading as well. So if our main target should be to to change farmers over to the use of protected urea, and as I said, maybe using the 010-20s, 07-30s, but in some cases, in smaller farms, the only product that may be available to them in 50 kilo bags is 18-6-12 or 10-10-20. And probably there's no harm with those lower stock farms using those type of products. Just when we look then at the fourth step on the rung of the ladder is using low emission slurry spreading. So we know that when we use low emission slurry spreading, there's a 10 to 20% increase in the nitrogen use efficiency. So that's good for the pocket and good for the environment. And also, there's a 60% reduction in nitrogen ammonia loss to the atmosphere when you're using less. So I suppose there's a lot more contractors with low emission slurry spreading devices or machines out there. So there's not much of as a problem using it as maybe it was in the past. The other thing, we're trying to reduce the overall chemical nitrogen use by 10% nationally. So as I said already, if you apply lime, you're probably naturally going to do that because you're releasing background nitrogen and you're getting more efficient use of the nitrogen that you apply. The other thing there is, maybe the use of clover, and we'll talk about that later on. That'll hopefully reduce your overall chemical nitrogen usage. And the other thing is we need to be careful about when we put it out and under what growing conditions we put it out, and so matching grass growth and nitrogen use at different times of the year, that's going to be vitally important as well, especially in sheep farms.
Yeah, that spring application is critical. Is time right, particularly from an uptake point of view. But again, there's potential cost savings there in farms, Tom. It's not only the environmental benefits, but like everything you outlined in them are all practical steps to reduce the input costs and get better use out of the nitrogen that is already on farms. And considering the fact that a lot of sheep farms are mixed, the less is certainly another technology that could be implemented.
Yeah. So and the other thing, probably when we move on, then maybe the sixth step that is outlined there on the 12 steps is better grassland management. Farmers is putting in paddocks, maybe taking off takes, and when you do the like of that, you're better utilizing the grass that actually grows on your farm. And the other thing, maybe taking off takes, you're increasing the quality of the silage, and anything that, when you have a better product then that you're feeding over the winter, that's also reducing the emissions from your methane emissions from your livestock, so that's another aspect that we can look at as well.
And again, it's another investment you're going to get an instant return back on. Just look, you're leading really into the livestock end of it. What are the couple of steps we can target on the livestock side that can have an impact on the environmental emissions from the farm, but also on a positive impact on the economics from it as well?
Yeah, so probably there's a lot of emphasis on this now, like, when it's looking at animal health, like, and flock health and the sheep situation, like, so probably there was emphasis in the past under STAP and other schemes that were on doing a flock health plan, and that's vital that farmers would do that, and then concentrating on areas such as, lameness control, because lame sheep don't thrive. They're going to be longer on your farm. Lame ewes, could end up dry ewes and will have reduced litter size, like, so they're important issues. The other thing that can be addressed in the health plan as well is dosing and vaccination, and dosing and the use of antibiotics kind of replaced with vaccinations is important, because there's a lot of emphasis now on antimicrobial resistance and antibiotic resistance being a major problem on sheep farms. So that's something that all farmers need to address. The whole health issues. Healthy sheep will produce more, and that's good for the pocket and I suppose and the environment as well. Like,
yeah, and it's true. Like, them poor doers, not only are they hitting you financially and from a management point of view, but they are also ones that are going to be around on farm longer, less efficient right the way throughout, and have a bigger impact. So yeah, that's a win-win. Like,
yeah. The other one then, when all the health issues are taken care of, like, we still need to, improve the quality of, and we're moving on to step 8 now, is improve the quality of the replacements that we bring into the flock. So we can do that by, maybe keeping the lambs off the best growing lambs at weaning, keeping our best ewe lambs, and also using the Eurostar sheep index when we're buying rams to actually, if we want to look at the maternal index. So we know that, rams that are high 5-star rams on the maternal index will end up breeding ewes that will actually will scan better, will have more lambs born. Ewes that will have less lambing difficulty. There'll be more increased. They can lead to increased survivability of the lambs, and they're also showing those ewes are probably better milkers, and then they're producing lambs with a higher weaning weights, like, so that's something that is, again, all of these we're kind of saying the same with all of them. Like, that's also, as well as being good from an environmental sustainability point of view, it's also good from a profitability point of view as well, and an output per ewe, which mainly is the main driver of profitability on most sheep farms.
And it has management benefits as well, from reduction in labour, like, and reduced mortality as well is a big benefit. So yeah, it's another one, having that breeding policy in place on the win.
Yeah, and then, like, we talked about prolificacy and number of lambs born per ewe, and that's something we have to target as well. And that moves on to point number 9, like, that when you target high prolificacy, you're increasing the output per ewe. If we target there in a lowland situation, from a profitability and sustainability point of view, we're targeting about 1.55 lambs reared per ewe joined to the ram, and we're also looking at on a hill sheep, that 90% of the ewes going to the ram on a hill situation will actually lamb down, so they're the 2 prolificacy targets that we have. And then, when we move on then to number 10, it's something that maybe some farmers do naturally and some have never tried at all, like, but is breeding from ewe lambs. And if you're carrying a sheep there for the same, and we're trying to get a big emphasis on getting suckler farmers to calve their heifers at 24 months. If you have an animal there that's hanging around the farm for 12 months and not producing any offspring, like, that's probably it's belching out methane. It's better to get an output from that animal. So when you're breeding from ewe lambs, like, I suppose that the main target there is to have them at the correct weight at mating, and that's generally about 65% of their mature weight. Like, and that's probably the critical factor when you're breeding from ewe lambs. Like,
We have to be conscious there too, Tom. Like the couple of points you touched on earlier, the breeding plan, the better grassland management, the better animal health, they're all going to have a knock-on impact on the prolificacy and the ability to make ewe lambs. And as you said, look, it's not something for every system, but there is benefits for those who can do it.
Yeah, yeah. And then we move on to point 11. Then, like, it's finishing lambs earlier, and how do we do about that again? That, as you said there, that goes back to grassland management, maybe paddock systems. It goes back to flock health as well, having these lambs in as good a health condition as we can. And then picking the right sire, like, and the Sheep Ireland have shown that, if we use the terminal sires, 5-star terminal sires, that'll lead to, increased average daily gain of the lambs and the reduction in the days to slaughter. So that's all, they're all the main animal issues, like, or ewe issues on the farm. Like.
You touched on one there earlier, and it's the final point, Tom, in it, incorporating the clover. I suppose to an extent that ties in again with points 2 and 3 in the whole site fertility, but it's something that's going to become increasingly important, particularly on dry stock farms, indeed in all farms, but it has a role in sheep farms.
Yeah, it definitely has a role in sheep farms, and we're seeing that from research that was carried out in Athenry, like, and extra weight gains and reducing the demand for chemical nitrogen, like, so we are looking at, if you're reseeding or trying to broadcast clover into swards there, you're putting on a rate of maybe 2 kilos at least per acre, and that, when you've a sward there with maybe 20-25% clover in it, it can replace 80 units of nitrogen per acre, of chemical nitrogen. But the one thing, like, and there, a lot of sheep swards are very, very dense, very thick, like, so probably the full reseed, maybe the only viable method for actually getting clover established, is going to be very difficult to maybe get it into, especially grazed sheep swards. Maybe an opportunity with silage swards, like, after cutting silage to get it established there, but it raises a difficulty establishing it. But
it's something we touched on in the earlier podcast, and again, like, if one clear point was pointed out, it needs mechanical intervention to get into that sward, and you touched on there is the density. I suppose, Tom, too, in the picking of that sward, some of the planning for that in terms of getting the pH right, getting the soil fertility addressed, are things we can do this year for planning for next year.
Yeah, and the other thing is, like, there was an issue last year there with actually getting the correct clover seed, like, so in a sheep situation, the ones that persist longest are probably the smaller leaf to medium leaf clovers. So there was an issue with getting those last year, but so you need to plan well ahead, like, and talk to your seed company, and if you're thinking of, establishing clover, that you would do it early in the year as well, like, so it's done in maybe early May. And that you plan ahead and have the seed there if you're going to try and establish it.
It's something that certainly has to be on the agenda for a lot of farms in coming seasons. Look, Tom, I suppose we're just to synopsize them points. A lot of them are interrelated. All good advice that you would hand to anyone independent of this, but it's a useful 12 steps to go through in a farm and actually look at your business and say, well, what one of these are applicable to it?
Yeah, and most farmers will find that, they probably are implementing a lot of them, naturally anyway, from year to year, like, especially any farmers that are progressive and trying to increase their output per ewe, like, so a lot of the steps could be in place anyway, like, and maybe the one that would stand out for me would be the application of lime, like, on the main benefits of it, and how cheap that product is now when you compare it to fertilizer cost, like, so that's one that maybe increasing the pH up above 6.3 is something that we all as farmers can look at.
I think, like, that one's applicable regardless of stocking rate. It's just one that should be implemented anyway. Tom, it was good having you on. I think it's a nice practical way to break it down, and it's a good idea just to go through it. So I'll include a link to that in the description. I think it's a useful document to refer back to. Look, really appreciate you coming on today.
Thanks, Kieran.
Okay, we're going to leave it there for this episode. I've included a link to that document Tom was discussing in the description of this podcast. I've also included a link to the Teagasc Signpost webpage. I would encourage anyone to visit it. There's a wealth of information on it. it's well worth a look. That's it for me. Again, for any updates from our sheep programme, keep an eye on our Twitter page at Teagasc Sheep. I'm Kieran Lynch. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to like, subscribe and follow us for more episodes.